So Neil, one other question that keeps coming up is about property.
So a lot of NRIs actually inherit property from their families. And then the tax rules come in which complicate life even more.
And is this something you'd have to talk about even in the US? Tell me more about Gift City. What is it about?
India does not deduct tax on Gift City funds. One of the ways to hedge is to invest in countries which may fall on either side of the geopolitical divide. So,
What do you think about gold at this time?
again, from an NRI point of view, India has this history of imposing customs duties.
Yes. What are your thoughts about investing in countries like the UAE or Dubai?
From an NRI point of view, the yields in UAE are higher. Why not?
I'm about to interview Neil Borate. He leads personal finance at Mint as deputy editor, reaching millions of people every month. But what makes him different? He really gets the NRI struggle. So welcome to the first episode of Beyond Borders, the ultimate NRI podcast. Neil, thank you so much for being here today.
Delighted to be here.
Now, when it comes to properties, a lot of times we find ourselves looking at, the right investment vehicle, and you mentioned that it's probably something that with lower returns. I want to talk, sort of double click on that. I'll give you an example. There are people who are sitting abroad in limbo. They don't know whether should I move, should I not. A lot of folks are saying just buy something and rent it until you've decided, right? So at least there's some cash flow coming in.
Yeah.
But would you think it's a good investment idea? Because I have my own opinions about it, but I'd love to know yours.
Sure. So there are some positive things that have happened in India, like RERA, like builders now increasingly being organized and therefore the old system of projects never being completed to an extent reducing. But the taxation system and the necessity of taking care of it does remain. So we spoke about rent earlier and also the fact that you need to have either family or an agent to take care of it. There's also capital gains tax. Now, capital gains tax has seen a big change in the 2024 budget. So before that budget, it was short-term capital gains at your slab rate, long-term capital gains at 20% with indexation. After that budget, the finance minister made it 12.5% as a uniform rate. There was a lot of hue and cry about historical properties and them losing out on indexation benefit. So she gave an exception that if you bought your property before the budget date, then you can choose. But that exception was only for resident Indians. So for NRIs, they're stuck on the 12.5%. Now that rate actually works well if your growth rate is very large. Then the effective rate actually is favorable here. But if it hasn't grown much, then indexation would have been a better tax deal. But be that as it may, that option is no longer there. The other thing that NRI should keep in mind is again TDS. So when a resident buyer buys the property from you, the TDS rate is much higher than it would be from resident seller.
Interesting. So even selling is something that we'd have to be careful of.
Yes.
And there are tax implications coming to it. So for those folks who have a lump sum here, is there something, you'd ask them to start researching on or thinking about in terms of you have lump sum and you want to invest in India? What would be certain ideas you could give them?
So for those who don't want to rush into the stock market, NRE FD is still great. It's not taxed in India.
I see.
And the rates, even though the differential has come down, they are still higher than the US, Europe, most other jurisdictions. There's also FCNR FDs, which you can have in foreign currencies. And again, those rates are higher than the corresponding dollar rates in the US. But eventually, the money has to grow. It has to compound. And that's where a structured investment in the stock market, let's say through a mutual fund SIP, comes in.
Understood. And that is still sort of, I think, a growing area within India, right? I think both people within India and outside are slowly starting to get more aware, be more aware of the SIP systems. So Neil, one other question that keeps coming up, and this was something that bothered us while we were abroad too, is about property. whether is it even worth it in India to invest in property, because out there in the West, it's a pretty well set up property management system. You want to have rental income, you want to have those investments. It's a steady modicum of operation. But in India, it seems like everything's in flux. So what are your thoughts? If someone is sitting on a lump of cash, would you recommend them investing in property in India? If yes, how, what kind, and what are some things they'd have to keep in mind?
So a lot of NRIs actually inherit property from their families. So it's a millstone around their neck, whether they like it or not. But yes, people do also buy a lot of it. And in most large Indian cities now, the rental yields are around 2%, which is not a great deal. That's one side of it. The other side of it is taking care of the property. And you have to either rely on a family in India, which they say did to you, doing it for you out of love and affection, but it's a family. There are dynamics. Or you have to hire somebody and pay the agent's costs. So that complicates life a bit further. And then the tax rules come in, which complicate life even more. So, for example, your tenant has to deduct TDS for you at the marginal rate. So 31.2%, they have to cut TDS. Unlike a resident landlord where the TDS rate is 2%, for NRIs it's that high. So then you have to file returns in India and claim a refund if you're due a refund, or adjust it against your other tax liability.
But tell me more about Gift City. And I've been, hearing a lot about it now, but probably didn't hear about it until like a few weeks ago. So tell me more about Gift City. What is it about?
So the intent was to build a Singapore counterpart within India and to attract foreign capital, including NRI capital, and give people a window which is outside our complex system of foreign exchange regulations and tax regulations. Now, the reason why things haven't really massively taken off is they're proceeding very cautiously. So right now, most Gift City funds have a minimum in ticket size of $1.5 lakh. They are all structured as AIFs, not as traditional mutual funds. Now that is about to change. I would say maybe in 6-8 months, we'll have the first retail funds coming up in Gift City for as low as $5,000.
Okay.
And I think then a lot of NRIs would actually prefer to come in through that route rather than directly buy a mutual fund.
Understood. And this is just open for all, right?
Open for all.
Okay.
Even foreign citizens who have no connection whatsoever with India.
All right. And is this something, again, there are tax benefits later on? Is this something that we can pull money out of later, or are we tied into this for a certain period of time?
No, most of these will be open-ended funds. Okay. A few funds might themselves have exit loads, but that's mainly to maintain liquidity, not so much a regulatory matter.
Got it.
And the idea is to keep it open both in terms of repatriation, you can pull out money whenever you want, and taxation-wise, there is no Indian tax applicable to Gift City funds in Gift City. Now, of course, there is one proviso to this. When a Gift City fund in turn invests in Indian stocks and it makes, say, capital gains, then the fund will pay tax.
Okay.
So it does take a bite out of your returns.
Sure.
But at least you don't have to deal.
But you don't have the onus to prove and present all that. And it's open, right? At this point, anybody can go in and start investing in Gift City.
Of course, there's a KYC process.
Of course, yes.
But you don't need a PAN card, for example.
Traditionally, at least while we were growing up, a good gift would have been gold. Buy a gold bracelet, buy a gold pair of earrings. What do you think about gold at this time? Is it still a good investment vehicle for people with sitting on cash, or even NRIs, even domestic folks, right? What are your thoughts about gold at this time?
So I've historically always been a bit of a gold bull.
Okay.
Not always for the most rational reasons. I worry about inflation, and to an extent that thesis did play out, especially in the past year. Now that we are at the end of a massive rally, or not end, but at least we've seen a massive rally, I am personally a little cautious on gold. But again, from an NRI point of view, India has this history of imposing customs duties on gold, making it unnecessarily expensive for Indian residents. So if you do want to buy gold, you'll actually probably find it cheaper in an ETF in the US than here.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Because we heard about the sovereign bonds and all of those being...
So that was the one exception, the sovereign gold bond scheme, which was tax-free, held in maturity, and carried an interest rate, which you don't get anywhere else. But they quickly realized it was very foolish from a government point of view, so they've stopped issuing anymore.
Not making money out of this. Understood. We have REITs sitting here in India. There are a lot of those REIT schemes abroad as well. What's your take on the REITs here in India? Are they mature enough? Is it a good idea to invest in these vehicles?
So there are only a few REITs or REITs in India, real estate investment trusts. They tend to have yields in the 5 to 6% range, so that's not particularly exciting. And they're diversified vehicles. So the minimum asset size for a regular REIT is 500 crores. A more efficient way of holding them, because if you directly hold them, then you have to pay tax according to each distribution. So a REIT can give you dividends, it can give you interest, it can give you rent. You have to tabulate how much is coming from which REIT and pay tax. So an efficient way is to do it through a mutual fund where all of these distributions just get added to the fund's NAV, and whenever you sell the fund, only then you have to pay tax. Now, there's one exciting part to this real estate story, which is the emergence of SM REITs or smaller medium REITs. And what SEBI has done here is it has brought down the minimum the minimum asset size from 500 crores to 50 crores. So this allows you to take a bet on a specific property. You like this particular warehouse, you like this office building, and this becomes a REIT in itself. So the yield can also be a lot larger than 5 to 6%, and the appreciation can also be bigger because you never know, the area takes off, the building does really well, people want to buy it for higher price. And this is open to NRIs, so there is no differentiation here between residents and NRIs. It's just emerging, so so far there's only been one SM REIT that's been launched.
Okay.
But there's a lot of fractional real estate players who are shifting to SM REIT status. And over the next few years, I think this can really take off.
Absolutely. So we're moving from JV, put your money in and grow a warehouse, to I'm going to be one of the few people who will fund it and get it out into the market.
Yes, that's correct.
It's been a favorite thing, right? You take any domestic flight in India and you'll see a poster behind about invest in UAE or invest in Dubai and all of those places. Forget about investing in India. What are your thoughts about investing in countries like this, like the UAE or Dubai? Would you think that's a reasonable investment vehicle?
So I've seen a lot of startups and startup founders relocate to Dubai for business and tax reasons. The lack of income tax is a big draw. From an NRI point of view, if the yields in UAE are higher, why not?
Correct, because the yields in India are, like we discussed, quite low compared to everything else.
Yes.
So maybe looking outside of India for real estate investments would probably be a better option if we're looking at it as a growth vehicle. Now, that brings me to another question. We typically think of trusts when we're looking at estate planning, right? We're writing all of those gory details about life after and all that. How would somebody have to think about that in terms of being an NRI with property here in India or any investments here in India? What would your suggestions be for them?
So thankfully, India does not have an inheritance tax.
Right.
That's one advantage we have over many other Western jurisdictions. In fact, a lot of Indians who invest abroad, who are Indian residents, they're quite surprised to know that US has an inheritance tax above $60,000 if you're
and a big percentage.
Yeah. If you're a non-resident alien, as in if you're an Indian resident. So I think from a succession point of view, India that way is quite straightforward. You just need to ensure you have a will just properly registered, 2 witnesses so that it can't be challenged easily in court. And it will work for any property you have in India.
Got it. So any kind, there is it, and you really don't need a stamp paper or anything anymore at this point?
Under the law, a will is valid even if it's written on a plain piece of paper, even a tissue paper. If you write a will, perfectly valid. There have to be 2 witnesses. However, you still need to make it bulletproof against legal challenges from other people who may not be happy with it. So that's where registration comes in. It's not compulsory, but it's good to do.
I see. And this applies even for people who are not resident Indians and everybody. The rule applies for all.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So for those folks who are sitting outside India and they're looking to invest here, are there any sort of platforms you'd recommend to say these are safe? Go ahead and trade on them or transfer your monies through that. Any recommendations you'd have?
So I would say, as much as possible, don't trade, invest. Not only because investment tends to do well in the long term, but also when you trade as an NRI, there are additional rules to follow. There is PIS, non-PIS accounts. So best not to get into those complications. Now, within mutual fund investment, within that universe, there are 2 platforms which are owned by the industry overall. And so they are free and they're likely to remain so for a long period of time. So there is MF Utilities and there's MF Central.
Okay.
You can choose either, and they do quite a good job of aggregating all your mutual fund investments.
At NRI Shaala, we understand the unique challenges facing global Indians. We're publishing new videos every day, curated specifically for our community. So do subscribe and share with fellow NRIs.